everyone. I'd like to start off this morning by saying thank you for allowing me to speak. I want to put a little disclaimer out here right now that I'm not standing up here pretending to be something that I'm not. I sin like everyone else. My faith has been challenged on many occasions. I have had many disruptions of faith in God, but despite these disruptions, there has always been something deep down in my soul continuously echoing, reminding me of God and how He is very much real. I believe it has been Him intervening in my troubles in my life over the years. I currently have some personal stuff going on in my life that my wife asked me, "Have you prayed about it?" And I responded with, "No, I don't feel worthy," especially with how this issue does not compare to many bigger issues that people have. She replied, "You're doubting God's power. He's able to handle everything." And she's absolutely right. The point I'm hoping to deliver this morning is that pretty much everyone has something going on in their lives. Many people around us don't know about these obstacles that we endure or have endured. Many of these obstacles have been contributed to by past experiences, by other people, by nature itself, or by something else. Whatever the obstacle may be, it may put us in a dark place and challenge our faith, perhaps even question God. This brings me to my story of a young man whose past was his greatest obstacle. He also faced other obstacles throughout his life that were very challenging to him. His past consisted of him being abducted when he was only 1 year of age and being kept in isolation for the better part of 18 years of his life. A variety of other trying times and difficult situations would later come as well. During this man's childhood, he was prevented from going to school or getting a formal education for the sake of his abductor, his non-custodial father, not being caught by the police. In fact, this boy never stepped foot in a school a single day in his life, in his childhood. This man's past as a child would not only be challenged in the aspect of lacking basic knowledge needed to move forward in his pursuit of employment and higher education later in his life, but also his social interaction, as he would not be around very many people growing up due to hiding. As a child, he would be verbally, physically, and sexually abused by his abductor, his own father. This man, as a child, would be led to believe that he was not smart enough to apply himself to many things, as his abductor would label him as stupid and dumb on a regular basis, making him feel as if he was an imposter amongst others later in life. His father would punch him in the stomach with a closed fist, beat him with a board with flattened nails in it, and even tie him up to a vertical steel beam and beat him with leather strops that were originally meant for sharpening razor blades. One night, he was kicked while he was down on the floor picking up a piece of candy. One night, when living in a tent in a brush pile, this boy was approached by his father under the dim light of a kerosene lantern, and from there, that boy was sexually assaulted. This boy's childhood living conditions changed several times. He lived in an old blue van, an old tan van, and even in an old gutted-out school bus. Additionally, he lived in a camper hid in a garage, an old ragged tent hid in a brush pile near the woods in a cow pasture, an old camper hid in a barn, and lastly, an old house that was originally meant for storage. Moreover, this boy would have to move from state to state, living in Idaho, Arizona, California, Nevada, and so on, in his father's further efforts to avoid detection by the law. A few years into this boy's childhood, he would realize that his life wasn't normal as others. He did not have running water, electricity, a mattress to sleep on, adequate food, variety of food, the ability to go out during daylight hours, the ability to bathe, the ability to go places, and yes, again, the ability to go to school and make friends. In fact, his water would be provided in fuel cans for years. Electricity would be a car battery that had to be recharged weekly. Food would be a limited variety from a budget consisting of less than $90 a month. The few times he would go somewhere, he had to be cognizant of his surroundings and hide continuously. This boy would never have the basic understanding or experience of the simple things of like sports, going to church, going to the movies, or going to prom. He would gradually start learning how to read, write, spell, and solve math with the assistance of his father's family, who recognized that something needed to be done about his education. However, that too would be extremely challenging as there was no structure or dedicated time due to his father's continued efforts to hide. He would be told to hide in the crawl space of a house for hours, in the back of a dump truck for hours, in a hiding compartment underneath a gas stove for hours, in a ditch for hours, in a closet for hours, and even in a foxhole on a cold winter night. On some occasions, when this boy's father would go out during daylight hours, he would put this boy inside an army duffel bag and transport him from point A to point B, so that only a man with a bag would be seen instead of a man with a child. On some occasions, this boy at only the age of 8 would be asked one night while hiding in a ditch, "If the cops come, do you want to shoot it out, or do you want me to end it for us?" When Santa come, it wasn't like it was for most children. In fact, one year, while living in the tent, Santa did not come. My life as an adult, I have served in the Army. I have faced challenging times, dark times, where I did not want to be on this earth any longer due to the continuous challenges I was facing and not feeling as if I was adapting. I even daydreamed in my mind of how I would exit this world. Early in my law enforcement career, I remember starting to feel the weight of the badge and thinking of how my service weapon was just in the top drawer of my dresser and how quickly I could make this crazy life of mine go away. However, I thought of that boy and everything he endured growing up. I knew that boy had continuously pushed through his barriers for years. I know this today because I was that boy. I have continued to face more challenges as life goes on. During a convoy in Iraq, my lead vehicle was blown up by an improvised explosive device, better known as an IED. And not a scratch was on me or any of the other soldiers that were in that vehicle. Later in life, during my law enforcement career, deep in some woods, I would struggle for my life while fighting with someone who wished to kill me. This individual attempted to take my gun from my hand. It was as if he could not even lift it. From my perspective, at that moment, it was as if there was a force greater than anything with me that prevented him from taking it, allowing me to persevere. The outcome of that night would make me deal with more obstacles in my life as only one of us walked out of the woods that night. In Matthew 17:20, Jesus said, "If you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you." I don't think it's coincidental. I stand here today still feeling lost in many ways and undeserving of God in many ways. However, despite these feelings, despite my sins, despite my failures to God, despite my lack of knowledge of the biblical scriptures, I feel that God has been with me throughout my trying times because I have a small piece of faith that has never perished. With the help of my family and good friends, I've been able to overcome my fears and get a GED, start a family, establish a career in law enforcement. And despite not having any formal education growing up, I graduated college, obtaining my master's degree, which has recently enabled me to teach criminal justice at a local college. Everyone and everything, even if it was negative or positive, has fallen right in place in my life, bringing me to where I am, despite my past as that boy. At this time, I would like to tell you a little bit more about my life growing up as that boy. And I'd like to go ahead and just answer some commonly asked questions. I get these questions a lot, so I went ahead and prepared some of them in case any of you were wondering. And of course, afterwards, if you'd like to ask anything that you might be inquiring about, then go ahead. But one of the commonly asked questions I get is, where's your father now? Well, my father is actually deceased now. He passed away back in 2008. I had I transferred into the Army Reserve from active duty and started working in corrections, and it was just a few months afterwards he passed away. Questions there, where's your mother? I don't really associate with my mother. I do believe she's living in Talladega, Alabama right now, but I'm not exactly sure. Another question would be, why did your father take you? Well, he claimed that my mom was not taking care of me at all. He said that there was also a sexual predator on her side of the family, which, makes you wonder what's up with that. But anyway, that was one of the reasons that he took me, is what I was always told. Another question is, how did you get your freedom? Well, actually, whenever I turned 19, I went to the St. Clair County Sheriff's Department. At the time, it was Sheriff Terry Searles. And I said, hey, here I am. I'm your missing person. And that's basically how that went down. My father wanted me to continue to hide until I was 19 because he felt that it would be too obvious, that we were hiding basically right under their nose, for however many years. Even though we had left the state, we had moved from state to state, traveling and changing vehicles and all of that. The later years was mostly spent in Alabama, primarily between Springville, Alabama and Aniana, Alabama. And so he just thought it might be too obvious if I come, out of hiding right at the age of 18. So he strongly encouraged me to wait until I was 19. Did your father ever get arrested? No, he never got arrested. There's a missing person poster that is going around right now, and it says a felony warrant was issued for his arrest. However, he was never arrested. He successfully kept me hid for about 18 years. I mean, we rarely came out during daylight hours. It was one of those things. Like, I remember on one occasion, if it wasn't me being put in an Army duffel bag, then it was one time he needed to go do some work for his brother. I think his brother would give him like $20 and a couple of plates of food for a day's work. And so that day, he took a wet wash rag and wiped away the dirt necklace around my neck, and he got a backpack and threw a few books in it, and it was during school time, so he just wanted to make everyone believe that I was going to school. But he combed my hair, but that was that. How did you learn how to read, write, and so on? Okay, as I mentioned in the story, his family was helping to hide us. So he had 2 brothers and a sister that were helping to keep us hid and everything. So whenever we were hiding in the garage, that was his brother's garage. When we were living in the barn, that was his brother's barn. The property where we lived in the old rugged tent in a brush pile, that was his other brother's property and everything. So that being said, his sister was like, hey, we've got to start teaching Jimmy. That's what they called me, it was Jimmy, which I had aliases also. My dad made me, he would not allow them to call me Jimmy for the most part, because he didn't want, if we were ever for some reason around somebody that we didn't know, he didn't want them, I was supposed to just be some random kid that no one knew anything about. So he would have me Carl, Nigel, Jasper, some very weird names, but anyway, those were some of the names that he come up with. And the way I learned how to read was his sister taught me how to read a little book. It was a little children's book, The Gingerbread Man. And that was my first book to actually learn how to read. I was 10 before I actually learned how to read. And her daughter taught me how to spell and write. Later on, my cousin, again, it wasn't very often that we would get to do this because we were mostly hiding. So every now and then it would just be 30 minutes or an hour that I might get that time to try to go over something like that. But my cousin, I remember being 17 and we had some two-way radios, and that's how I would learn division. Is I would ask my cousin, hey, can you send me some division problems? Because I didn't even know what division was. If you would have asked me just prior to that, how many times does 5 go into 10? I would not have even known how to answer your question because I didn't even know what it was. I never really learned how to take notes. The way I describe it to people is I never really learned how to learn. If that makes sense. Like, I know it sounds extremely simple, but like, I didn't know what did I need to write down, what was important that I needed to write down or anything like that. So I also kind of did, a lot of it was self-initiated. There was an old 1970s edition of encyclopedias, and I would read in those, and I would go over the presidents and, different things, and it's kind of weird, but also in the later part of my life, my father had us doing guard duty at night. I was actually having to stand and look outside a window. I remember more specifically looking out a window at Fairview Baptist Church off of County Highway 27. He was always paranoid that that's where the cops would go and rally up to, swarm the house or whatever. So we would take turns watching and staying up, and so I would be bored out of my mind, and I would recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd get that out of the encyclopedias. They showed you what Braille looked like, so I'd make dents in plastic, and just, since I was sitting in the dark, I would go over Braille and, just trying to learn something. I was like, I wanted that in my life. I was excited to learn. Like, it was just one of those things that was fascinating to me once I learned how to start using proper punctuation or, something like that. Another question I commonly get is, why did your father abuse you? Nicotine, out of that $90 a month, he was a smoker, and he was very, very addicted to nicotine. If he didn't have nicotine, he became very, very violent. I think a lot of it was because of that. However, some of it was just, I don't know, I think it was just his personality. I don't really know exactly as far as the physical abuse. For example, whenever I was kicked, it was because my voice was so loud. I believe I was like 12 at the time, and that's when my voice started changing and stuff, and he kept telling me, he's like, you've got to stay quiet, and he just came up and kicked me as I was down trying to pick up that piece of candy. The verbal abuse, I don't know, maybe it happened to him growing up, I don't exactly know. But I definitely started believing it whenever I was being called dumb and stupid, and I won't say some of the other stuff he would say, but it was, I don't know, I guess he just didn't think of what kind of impact it would have, but it took a long time for me to finally not let that eat at me. Another common question, have you tried to start a relationship with your mom? I have. I've tried a few times. The only problem is she is a stranger to me. If she said, I love you, then I truly did not feel the same way. And it was also there in my mind, like, why did it take the missing person poster that's going around right now? I was like, why did that take 17 years for that to happen? Like, how hard were you really looking? That was something that was always in the back of my mind. So I kind of felt like, it didn't matter which direction I went. I either had her as a mother or I had him as a father. It didn't matter. It was my fate to be with one of them, and it ended up being him. So, few interesting things about this lifestyle of mine. One part of it is whenever I came out of hiding, my first time to go to McDonald's, I didn't even know how to order a burger. I know that sounds extremely crazy or whatever, but I asked my cousin, I was like, how do I do this? Like, do I go up there and immediately pay? What do I do? And he would explain, the procedure for just going up and ordering a burger. And that was me at the age of 20. I'm 38 now, so. Growing up, there were a couple of occasions where I did get to go out during, and just be amongst other people in society during Halloween. I mean, think about it. Halloween, it's dark, you wear a mask. So we could freely walk around, didn't really have to worry about anything. But even that, he eventually became paranoid and thought even that wasn't a good idea. Flying on a plane. So I never got to fly on a plane until I joined the Army. And then my first time to experience flying on a plane, I jumped out of the plane, so I never even got to land in the plane. That was just a little fun fact. Another fun fact is I had a pet squirrel for 10 years during that time growing up. Called him Skippy. So Skippy was actually one of the best little pets I had during that time. Really, kept me occupied and everything. But everything that I've told you today, I'm really trying to especially reach out to the youth in the audience. Don't take things for granted, like simple things like a roof over your head, water, the electricity, all of these things like a toilet. I mean, just all of these simple things. I know it sounds silly to bring it up probably, but these are all things that I didn't have growing up. And so they make our life so much easier. And your education, I'm telling you, like when it started hitting me, whenever I started becoming aware of what was going on in my life, I was so badly, and even into my adult life, I'm like, where could I be now if I would have had a normal education? Like, where could I be? But I've tried to make up for that time missed and get the best education I can. But anyway, just things like that, just don't take it for granted. You're going to have obstacles in your life, many obstacles. I still have them. And like currently with my current situation, it's like kind of like mystery doors. It's kind of like just, what do I do? Like Jacob was saying last week, you feel like the devil is tickling at your ears. And that's exactly, I was thinking at that very moment how relevant that was to my current situation in life. Like there's just certain things that are intriguing about each door, and you're just like, is that just the devil right now? Or am I missing the big picture? And that's why, like my wife, and even a fellow soldier asked me, that's like, have you prayed about it? And then the other question was, have you put it in God's hands? Because you can't try to do anything out here alone. Like you've got, basically what the soldier told me is you've got to make that problem God's problem. And he's like, don't doubt him because he can handle anything. And I'm starting to realize that more and more now, I think. It's still, I think I'm kind of stubborn and still having trouble letting that happen. But last week also, the kids came up here and saying, God's still working on me. Again, that's exactly how I feel. I'm 38 years old and I still feel like I'm a work in progress. I'm working on it. I'm trying to become a better servant to God. But I know there is, like I said, there's something there because otherwise I wouldn't keep pushing. Resilience. It is easier said than done. Everyone in here has had obstacles in their life. Maybe not like mine, maybe worse, maybe similar. But the thing of it is that you're never alone. And I forget this too often. And so that's basically what I'm hoping to deliver this morning. I'm hoping you can take something from my testimony and apply it to your own current situation in life or apply it to someone else's life. Because even the obstacles in your lives, that might be something that someone could take from you and pass forward and change their life, have a lot of impact. And that concludes my testimony. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I'll put this back. Well, as I said, if there are any more questions, I can answer those. Okay, there is.
Do you remember when you first started to believe in God?
Yes, so the way I most strongly remember learning about God is actually through a little black and white screen TV. The TV that we watched was connected to a car battery. His brother would bring us a freshly charged car battery once a week. And I remember watching, I don't know how many of you remember it, but there was a show called Highway to Heaven. Yes. So that show is what mostly just got me, like, and it just reached down into your soul. I know it's just a TV show, but that was the most exposure I had to learning about God and everything. So that's when it started, like, making me have conversations. I remember hiding in the garage and having conversations with God and everything. Like, I'd take the little pet squirrel out in the garage, because out in the garage would be my outside, because we had a camper hid in the garage. So that was kind of my outside. So I'd go to the attic in the garage, and that's just, I can just remember, having conversations and everything. And, shows like Touched by an Angel, that was my exposure. Are there any other questions? Okay. So interesting thing is, shortly after I got my freedom, my very first job was working at Walmart. And so I met her. I was only there for about 5 months, but I was pulling freight, or, pallet or whatever, and she knocked over. Okay, I knocked it over. I knocked it over, and then a conversation sparked, and then a few months later, here we are. I mean, we're together and everything. So yeah, it's kind of like a country song in a way, Walmart, better. But that's pretty much how it started, though. So, yeah. Are there any other questions?
Was there ever a point in your childhood that you realized how bad it was and tried to run away?
That is a commonly asked question that I failed to write down. Yes, it did cross my mind. In fact, my father at one point, I don't remember what state we were in, but I can just remember some of his violent episodes. And I remember him reminded me of how he sacrificed his freedom for me, even though, he was bringing me along on the ride. But he was telling me, and he was cussing me and screaming, and he was like, pack a bag right now and just leave. He was telling me that. I was just, a little kid, but he was like, just leave, and he used, different choice of words and everything. But anyway, and then of course that one had happened, and we would continue to hide, but it did cross my mind. I was afraid of him. I was 100% afraid of him, and it wasn't until I got my freedom that I finally just stood up to him. He just had me under his control. Someone described it to me. They said, it sounds like you definitely had Stockholm Syndrome, because I did have feelings for my father. Even after everything he did for me, I always had feelings, always had love for him. But even more so later in my life, it started really sinking in what he had done to me and what was taken from me and everything. And so to answer your question, it had crossed my mind, but I was just afraid of failing and never actually following through with it. And then whatever repercussions would follow, me failing, severe beating, or whatever. Like so the gas stove I talked about that I was hiding underneath, that was actually in the bus. He had gutted it, and he would go out. This, I believe it was in Nevada at the time, but he made a hiding compartment underneath the gas stove, and he would say, okay, stay under here. He would fix it to where I could lock it from the inside, and it would look like just a wall, like underneath the stove. And he would say, stay here. I'm going to go wherever. I don't know where he was going, but I'm assuming going somewhere to work under the table to make some money, because I remember he did bring back some food that day. Or it happened like 2 occasions, I think. But I would just lie under there, like on the floor in a dark spot underneath the stove. And he threatened me. He told me, he's like, if you make any noise or anything, I will, you'll pay. So he'd beat me. So that's one of the things. I just never tried it. I was afraid of him. I was truly afraid of him.
Was there ever reconciliation
As in, like, that we, no, he actually, in his later years, we did not get along well at all. And it's in the back of my mind, because I really showed out the day before he died, because I'd met him. He was asking me to do something, and then he just started some of his typical stuff. Because when I joined the Army, he said, the occupation I chose to go in the Army. He's like, that's for losers, you know. He would just constantly say stuff like that. And so anyway, we weren't getting along. I remember right before I left for the Army, I took whatever I had made, my retirement or whatever, from Walmart and just gave it to him just to try to make me feel better. I was like, I brought him like a pie, I think, like a lemon pie or whatever. I was like, here's some money. And then he just continued to, talk to me in that manner and everything. So I just left and was like, I can't think about this or anything like that. But there was no, I'm sorry. I believe his whole time I did you a favor, sacrificed my freedom for you. And I don't know what would have happened to me if I would have lived with my mom. I truly don't. Talking to her now, everything would have been perfect. But there's a lot of other people that have told me otherwise. So it's hard to say. All I know is I'm alive now. I'm vertical and breathing. I survived that situation. So I feel like it happened for a reason. That might sound very weird, but I do feel like it happened for a reason. So that's what I'm using it for. I'm turning a weakness into a strength. That's what I'm trying to do. So are there any other questions?
When you turn yourself in, is that when you join the service?
Shortly after that, yes, ma'am. So I went and said, hey, here I am at the age of 19. And then shortly after that, that's when I got my GED. He was actually, while we were continuing to hide, I was going to Springville Public Library on Tuesday nights to take GED classes. I did that for 1 year because his brother talked him into it. He said, look, he has social security numbers not going to be flashed around. Nobody there is going to know him. Let him do this. It's going to be nighttime. There probably won't be many people there. So I was afforded that opportunity for a year to take GED classes for a solid year. And then what I've always described as a blessing in disguise, one of my cousins who was a part of that group, bringing us the weekly supplies and stuff, the charge car battery, the water and fuel cans. He dropped out of school at the age of 16. That's the part I feel is a blessing in disguise, because then about 2 months later, he realized, oh, I've made a mistake. And then so as a part of those weekly supply runs, we would take a little bit of time and study for a GED. He ended up buying a GED book, and so that would be another opportunity afforded to me to prepare to get some type of education. Any other questions?
When did you get your first Bible?
When did I get, so funny thing is I actually did have a Bible. My dad did hold on to a Bible from whenever I was born. It was white with gold lettering on the front. And he had a picture of me in it and everything. And he did eventually give that to me. But, it's crazy. It's like a monster that you're somehow having a relationship with. It's hard to describe, which is more the reason why I look at my past as such an obstacle, because it's just confusing. It's like, what do I take from that? I have someone that was doing this stuff to me, but at the same time, there was love there. He would bring love to me and everything. So it's just one of those things. But like in this day and time, like if anyone did to my children what he did to me, there would, it would not go very well. So that's just it. I'm very like lost in many ways. Like just like, okay, and all I can keep telling myself is like it happened for a reason. And that's why I feel like, yes, I am supposed to just turn it over to God and let God guide me through it, basically, because I don't know what else to do with this crazy life. Usually I just forget about it as best as I can and just continue driving forward with what I have, and that's all I can do. So I didn't even share this story for many years because it was embarrassing and everything, and then I just finally was like, okay, I feel like I have got to explain to people why I may not know what you're talking about, why I may need you to elaborate on something that's so simple, but yet to me, like, so confusing, like, because I didn't have that exposure, that normal social activity growing up or anything. So, any other questions?
His brother and stuff was okay? I mean,
His brother, the brother who was bringing the weekly supplies deep down, he was not okay with it. He did not like doing it. He actually, in my opinion, he had a heart of gold, but he was afraid, I think, of the repercussions. I think even he was afraid what could occur. Would Jimmy be better off with him or be better off with my mom? I think it's weird, but I think that's how some of them felt. Like they were like, which one would he really be better with? They didn't like the path he chose, though. They're like, why did you handle it this way? That was always being asked of him. And then he would take offense to it, and then he would stop hanging around those people. And his pride was really strong. So whenever that 90-something dollars never lasted us the full month. It would rarely get us by. My diet usually consisted of like biscuits 3 times a day, pinto beans 3 times a day, rice 3 times a day, sometimes popcorn 3 times a day, macaroni and cheese 3 times. He would buy in bulk. His brother would buy it from Sam's Club. And so my diet was very limited. Powdered milk, would be the calcium source or whatever. But going back to your question, I think he just was afraid of the repercussions. He was continuously worried about what was going to happen because they lied, including myself. When I got my freedom and I went to St. Clair County Sheriff's Department and said, hey, I'm your missing person, I lied. My father and I rehearsed what I would tell them because we came back and I said, hey, I just came back from Flagstaff, Arizona. A guy by the name of Russ driving a red Chevrolet Suburban is who dropped me off. My dad is still living in Flagstaff, Arizona. We had that set up because, again, he was afraid it would be too obvious if I came out at the age of 18. He didn't want it to be like, oh, we have been basically hiding under your noses for this long because unlike a lot of criminals, we just didn't go out. Like you see a lot of criminals go out to Walmart and then try to steal something, and it turns out they have a warrant for their arrest or whatever. And he didn't do that. Very, very, very rarely did we do something like that. And then it was like, hey, make sure you're ducking down in the car as much as you can. Don't be seen. If we're in an area that he was afraid someone that might know us or whatever, he'd say duck down. We'd both get down as low as we could in the vehicle. But I think that's how a lot of them felt. And whenever they found out what he did to me, they all regret it now. They all regret why they didn't go ahead and intervene.
Do you have any communication with them now?
I do. It's not the best. I think I don't go visit them very often. I used to go there at least twice a year because they're still living in Springville, Alabama. But we don't communicate as often. There's been, a few issues where I think they're just upset with me, like, because I don't visit them enough because I'm playing Army or I've got my civilian job going on. I have a family. I've been going to college. And so, I don't feel like there's anything wrong because I'm not holding anything against anyone. I'm not even holding a grudge against my mom. And for a lot of you right now, you might be like, well, you should probably try. And there may come a day where I try again, but right now I don't think it can. I feel like this is where I'm at, where I'm supposed to be, because there's too many people that have told me why I was probably not better off with her. And so it's just like, well, and again, the missing person poster didn't come out until I was 17, which kind of seems, I was almost an adult at that time, so it just doesn't make much sense to me. So.
You would think that there would have been charges brought against his side of the family for withholding evidence about you.
You would think. I think that the way it worked out is by the time it was exposed, because whenever I got my freedom, he continued to hide for a long, long time. And I think what happened is basically statute of limitations probably kicked in. I was an adult now. It wouldn't matter anymore. I was able to do everything of my own free will. So I think that's why it happened. Tripp, you had a question, buddy?
Do you have any other siblings?
Yes. So I actually do have other siblings, half-sisters. One half-sister is, I do believe, maybe living in Talladega, Alabama. I'm not exactly sure. I have nothing against her either. I just don't hang out with any of those people right now. And then my other 2 half-sisters, they're both deceased. One died in a car crash. I never even got to meet her. My dad was apparently married about 5 times. So one of the women that he was married to ended up, I don't know how the crash, I'm not going to say that she was on pills or anything like that because I don't know, I wasn't there, don't know enough details about it, but somehow a crash happened and one of my half-sisters died in that crash. Another half-sister of mine who actually did come and hide with us for a short period of time in the later years, she is deceased now as well. She was actually physically and mentally challenged, and there were some things where she was having some surgery, and what was brought to my attention is that there was a blood clot or something like that. I'm not exactly sure, but that's what made her pass away. So I have no brothers, and basically, I mean, like I said, I don't really communicate with my living half-sister. Any other questions?
You said you were still having lots of issues, and I'm sure you do, but once there was a preacher came here, and he had been a drug addict all his life, and his old man, the Lord saved him and called him to preach. And then he spent the rest of his life preaching to drug addicted people. So God's got a purpose for you somewhere down the line.
Yes, ma'am. That I have been told that before, and that is, I love hearing stuff like that because you're taking your weakness and you're turning it into a strength that will empower other people to move forward in their life. That's the way I feel about it. I tell everyone, I've got 2 questions back there, it looks like. Hold on, boy, 1 second. That's how I feel, and that's why I feel by me coming out here and speaking at these different places, then it's given me an opportunity to hopefully give something that they can take for what it's worth to them, and then my childhood is not so much in vain. That is basically how I view it. So, boys, you had a question?
How old were you when your dad died?
How old was I when he took me?
No, when he died.
Oh, when he died, I believe he was about 60, roughly 60. Oh, how old was I? I was about 24. I was about 24 because I remember starting to work in corrections at about the age of 24. Adrian, you had a question, buddy? Okay.
How did you, I don't know how to word it, but like, how did you learn or become a father when Tripp was born? As far as to be a leader, to
That right there, I don't.
obviously you didn't have that to go on
Right.
growing up, you know?
Exactly. And that right there is a very good question. And I feel that basically the only thing I had to work with is basically be most anything but my father. Like if I can be the opposite of my father, and I'll give you an example of how I'm not holding a grudge. I'm really not. I mean, but I do kind of separate myself from him. That is, and I know it's really weird sounding, but something like when I apply my signature to something, I always include Junior just to separate myself. I want people to know I'm not James Stevens Sr. I am James Stevens Jr. So, and I mean, I of course named Tripp James Arthur Stevens III, but that's just because I can't continue to, but I just want people to know, hey, I'm not the guy that did that stuff. And it's just a psychological thing, I believe. But to answer your question, I think that's basically just what I used as just being anything but him, pretty much. Of course, there could be worse people. There's worse monsters out there. There's worse people. And there's always someone that's had it better, or excuse me, worse than someone else, like plenty of people. You see people out starving, in the world, drinking from little mud puddles and stuff, people that have went through way more abuse than I have. But again, not everyone, let's put it this way, a lot of people relate to things differently. And a lot of people may not be so comfortable to come out and speak about the things they have endured. And I just happen to be finally comfortable enough to come out and speak. And so that's where we're at, basically. Any other questions?
Do you still have nightmares or flashbacks or just, I know you said about the thing you don't like, but does that still affect you? And being a Christian, trying to deal with, trying to accept God. Do you blame God for this?
I don't believe I believe that the fear of God was put into me very young in age. Like I believe that I learned about that well enough. I also remember seeing on Easter Sunday, the Ten Commandments coming on. I believe, I believe it was called, the Ten Commandments, or anyway, yes. So it would always be played on Sunday, and I would learn a lot from that. And I don't think I ever really blamed God. I think just blindly my faith in God has probably drifted away at times. I've never like just come out and said, you know, anything hateful towards God or anything like that. I just feel like blindly, like me just becoming blind and not really seeing what is in front of me. Or if it is something negative, I'm not taking the time to realize, hey, even negative things are put in our life. No matter what, it may be small, may be big. I did have dreams. My cousin even said, he's like, I'm afraid of him. Like he's like, I've had dreams of him chasing me or something and trying to kill me. And I said, I understand. I mean, it's just his demeanor and the way he would act, and I mean, his abuse and everything. Not everyone got to witness all of the abuse, but the physical and verbal was very much real and very much right there for people to see. And yes, the past is just always coming up. I've called Tristan before with certain things in my life, like just a matter of years ago, and just broke down because I'm just like, I would stem back to that life of mine, and I would just be like, is it, you know, am I ever going to truly be able to adapt? Am I ever going to be able to move forward the way I want to move forward? Like, because whenever I move forward, I'm moving forward with a struggle typically. It's not like just a smooth transition. It's like, okay, I'm going to do this. For example, when I went to college, I was absolutely scared to death. I was like, I've never stepped foot in a classroom like this. I'm going to be amongst a lot of people that are way smarter than me, and they're going to know how to take the notes. They're going to know all of this stuff, and I'm going to be here just trying. You know, I'm just going to be up here trying or whatever. So anyway, but I did it. I just jumped in the water, and I just basically, I guess you could say, started testing my courage and everything, and I did it, and I started realizing that I was doing really good, making really good progress, and I have to say, I'm not judging anyone at this moment, but I feel like a lot of the people that were around me just truly took a lot of things for granted. So the drive was not there like it was for me, because I wanted to prove to myself I could do this. I wanted to prove to my boys, you know, or at the time Trip, I wanted to prove to him, hey, I can do this. And so that's what I'm getting at. Like, you can do all kinds of stuff. You've just got to set your mind to it. And I, as I said, it's not just you though. Don't try to do it alone, because when I say God is who's got me through this, it's because God has put the right people in my life. Everything happens for a reason. I'm a firm believer of that. Everything happens for a reason, and that's why I'm where I'm at right now. And I'm sure there's going to be many other obstacles ahead of me, probably some that are going to be way more. Some of them I don't even want to think about. Some of them I just don't want to be tested on, honestly. But I'm hoping that the trials that have been in my life so far, hopefully, are enough for you know, me to just continue doing what I'm doing. And so that's where I'm at. Are there any?
Do you feel like the past, your childhood, and the traumatic experiences, do you feel like you have, I don't know if the right word is an advantage, or we'll say advantage, it may not be the best word, but like for fellow soldiers that's in the Humvee that's about to get blew up, or for other law enforcement that is in a dangerous situation, would you say your mindset from what you went through that you're more prepared to handle that? Or
I think, to answer that question, I think so, but I also feel that I'm at an advantage in my career, because my encounters are with people who have trouble in their life. I have a lot of encounters with people who are suicidal, that are depressed and everything like that. And I feel like, maybe not so much with law enforcement officers or fellow soldiers, maybe, you know, not in that aspect, or maybe so, but I do feel that I am at an advantage with building rapport with people, with communicating with people, because I can relate in so many aspects, you know, that other people, I'm not saying they can't, because I feel like, again, every one of us have something that we've endured. It may just be that you're not wanting to share it, and that's okay. It might be that, you know, you just don't even, you haven't tried to turn it over to God or anything like that. But whenever I go out and deal with someone that's like that, that's either suicidal or that's being mischief, whatever the case may be, I'm able to communicate with them in a manner that's like, hey, you know, think about this, and I'll talk to them a little bit about my past and where I come from, and I feel like for the most part, I get through. I have had people that I remember sharing my story with, and it didn't really work out for them, or maybe it's just with some of them it just hasn't yet. Maybe it just they need more time. Patience is definitely a virtue. I've also realized that over the years. Nothing just, you know, Rome was not built in a day. Everything takes time. But that would be the advantage of this past. I definitely feel like there would be no other field for me to pursue, I don't think, other than the field I'm in. I mean, there would be other fields, but I feel like I'm right where I'm supposed to be in law enforcement and everything. So, are there any other questions?
How close do you feel like that sketch is of the 17-year-old to actually what you look like?
So that I have about half people say that it doesn't look anything like me, which of course I've aged a lot since then. But
I see a resemblance.
yeah, I have.
I'm just curious how close they got it.
Yeah, a lot of people say it doesn't look anything like me, but then some are like, well, they did a really good job, because literally all they had was that picture of me as a baby. So they took that picture and, you know, developed that image or whatever. And I would say it's actually, in my opinion, not that bad. More so, though, when I was a little bit younger, which I still am like a baby, look like a baby apparently. So anyway, according to some people. But are there any other questions?
Do you have any other pictures from your childhood?
There are some, yes. I will have like a PowerPoint. There's not a lot of pictures, so the issue with that is my father did not want pictures being taken of me. The ones that we took were more like, he had a camera, took them, and then they stayed with us. He didn't want people, if we were at his sister's or something like that, it'd be like, don't take pictures of you know, Nigel is what he called me, or Jasper, or Carl, whatever the fake name was at the time, because he didn't want there to be images they might have duplicates of or anything like that. He didn't want them circulating around, and he was, you know, when it comes to him being paranoid and crazy, but I do have some. I have one of me with a pet squirrel and everything, and I might have like a few others, but not many. But just to kind of elaborate on his paranoia and everything a little bit more. So when we were living in the barn is where he had the foxhole. He had a foxhole inside the barn. It still exists to this day. I could take you there. Actually had a dog for a little while. The dog's name was Cowboy. I think he got him out in Arizona. Of course, that dog was used primarily as an alert system, not so much as just a family pet or whatever. It was primarily used as an alert system. And he would put vertical nails. He put vertical nails all around that barn in case anybody come. Hopefully they would get those. I have pictures of this as well, but he had like a pendulum type device that in the barn, it was an aluminum barn, so the walls and everything were aluminum. So he had it fixed where if they hit a tripwire, the little pendulum hammer type device or whatever would swing down and hit and then alert him if someone was near. He was actually good with electrical stuff, so he actually had some old-timey flash cubes or whatever that would spark real hot when you made the flash. And he would take firecrackers and stuff. He'd fix it where when two naked wires touched, it would ignite that, which would in return ignite the firecrackers, also alerting him if someone was near. And he would test this stuff. I would see it actually be used. It would work. We had to wear camouflage growing up, or dark clothing. If it wasn't camouflage, I had to wear dark clothing. As I said earlier, we did not bathe. We did not wash clothes for long periods of time. You could literally just take your finger and scrape the dirt, like the caked up dirt, off of my pants. It would be months at a time when I would have the opportunity to bathe, and that would be because we would go to his sister's place and take a bath there, or go to one of his brother's places and take a bath there. Again, typically he was too prideful and he didn't want to ask anybody to do it or anything like that, so we did not do it. But Did I answer? I'm sorry. What? Okay, the picture, yeah. So, but the paranoia, he had those nails going around, always had a shotgun next to him, carried a shotgun most everywhere, which his sister reminded him, James, you look way more suspicious if people see you out during the daylight hours. Because sometimes we'd go out of a garage and we would go to his sister's place during the daylight hours, but we would run. He would like literally run, and we'd be wearing camouflage, and we'd run to a ditch, and then we would follow like the ditch up in the woods or whatever to go to her place. He had knives strapped on. He kept a knife strapped on me. Just crazy stuff. And anyway, that was the type of stuff we did though. So there at that barn, he had the foxhole, he had the vertical nails, he had the pendulum device or whatever that he improvised for alerting people or alerting him. And he was 100% the way he described it. As I said, hiding in the ditch that one night, he asked me, do you want me to end it for us or do you want to shoot it out with him? And so luckily, nobody came along for him to think that he had to initiate that action. But that's just the way he was. He was very paranoid. Any other questions?
What about childhood illnesses? Were you ever sick and needed a doctor?
Very good question. So I failed to speak on that. So when I lived in Idaho, I remember actually busting my head open on some stumps. And I remember getting some stitches then. From there on out, there was never any other medical attention, no eye checkups, no dental checkups, no yearly checkups, or anything. By the time I turned 18, I had like a really bad ingrown toenail that like it was really bad, like needed surgery. And his brother would usually be the voice of reason. Be like, hey, his toe is gonna fall off, it's so bad looking. Like you got to let us do something. And so they paid cash money or whatever, had, completely removed the toenail of my left foot, which, she reminds me, it's so ugly. I'm like, well, it is what it is. But I'm throwing you under the bus while I'm up here now. Anyway, but yeah, that was not normal. Whenever I first got to see, like very clearly, like I wear prescription lenses, I'm wearing contacts right now. When I first got to see with clarity, like true clarity, it was in the Army. When I got issued some glasses and everything. So I was just like, whoa, like, it's amazing. But anyway, are there any other questions?
As a child, though, when you went about that toe, did you not have to give any information, your name, social security number, like they ask all these questions nowadays?
For that medical attention?
Yeah.
I don't know what they did. I was super, super young at that time. I can just remember it. I remember of the bright light being, and him being paranoid about it and everything, like worried. And that would be more the reason why we would leave state. If he caught on to anything that he thought might jeopardize our living conditions and successfully hiding or whatever, we had moved to a different location. If someone we talked to, he felt like they, for some reason, was becoming less trustworthy, he would move. Because I remember some characters. I remember a gentleman by the name of Lyle. I remember a gentleman, they called him Indian Tom. Indian, I remember he wore like a white boonie hat and a flight jacket, one of those old-timey flight jackets. Anyway, he trusted him, but then there would be other individuals, like the people he would get these vehicles from. And he would just all of a sudden not trust them anymore. And he would say, hey, don't mention, I remember he got some shoes one time for me because he was afraid that one of the strangers that was going to see me, because some people would come into our lives, but then I don't really know what would bring them about, but that was only while we were out of state. And he would be, don't let them see you with the shoes that you have, because the shoes that you have obviously have holes in them and everything. So he would get a better pair of shoes for the sake of just not letting that person, But as far as to answer your question about the social security number and all of that, I have no idea. I don't know how relevant it was back then. That was like in the late 80s, early 90s. I'm not exactly sure how advanced things were as far as like the National Crime Information Center, something used by law enforcement for tracking people across the country and everything. I'm not exactly sure how popular that was, or if the doctor, if it would have even sent up a red flag, if the doctor thought he needed to to send that to law enforcement, you know, I'm not exactly sure about any of that. But to answer your question, though, there was not much medical attention. That would be it, the two things I just mentioned. Are there any other questions? Okay, well, I guess that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for listening to me. I appreciate it.